Welcome to our weekly book club episode here at Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. My name is Megan, and my book-loving co-host is...
Hi, I'm Amanda.
Hello and welcome. So don't panic at the mention of book club. There was no homework to be here. We read the books, and you can read along with us, but you certainly don't have to. So if you're new here, you'll pretty quickly find out that we are a very flexible pair.
Yep, exactly. And we are realistic, right? We are a pair of homeschool moms juggling 10,000 things at any given time. We know how busy life can get and how you sometimes need to literally steal minutes where you can find them. So truly do what works for you, and we'll be cheering you on along the way.
That we will. The other thing that you'll quickly learn here is that we are a secular and progressive channel. So if you've ever started a conversation with someone in the homeschool world and in your head, you're thinking like, oh, this is going okay. Like this could maybe a friend. And then they bust out some conspiracy theory or start talking to you about how gravity isn't real, as if it was just a completely accepted fact. Like, well, you know how gravity is not real. And you're like, back to the drawing board. That is not my friend. You will not find any of that junk here. So welcome. You can relax. You can put your defenses down.
I don't even. Megan sent me a clip from Facebook last night, and it was this woman talking about how JFK Jr. is still alive and working with Trump to run the government. And they even confirmed, you mean the JFK that died? And she was like, oh yeah, no, he didn't. And I'm like, I don't, what is even happening? Okay. So anyway, we are all about the evidence-based science. We really like critical thinking, and we're big proponents of humans' rights around here. So if that specific combination feels hard to find in the homeschool world, especially where you are, where you live, congrats, you found us.
Yay. Oh my gosh, what a relief. Gosh, it's a nightmare out there. All right, so we're going to introduce the book that we're currently reading, and you're going to be like, secular my ass, right? Like, just told me they were secular, and this is what they're reading. But we promise it is secular. In fact, it has negative reviews on Amazon from people who say that the book is trying to push atheism on kids. So that's always an encouraging sign that your book is secular. So we are currently working through a 3-book series by David McAfee and Chuck Harrison about religion. But they look at religion from a secular perspective, and they will likely be a great resource in helping you discuss the idea of world religions with your kids and answering some of the burning questions that they come up with.
Yeah, no, I really think so. My kiddo is reading the book right now along with me, and it has led to some great conversations and discussions. So yeah, definitely. I think, you could use it as a jumping off point with pretty young kids and then revisit. This would be one of those that would be really easy to revisit every few years and just go deeper and dive deeper each time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so like Megan said, we finished the belief book already, and that was great. It's the first in the series. And now we are starting the book of gods. Plural, not just of God, right? So don't freak out on us.
Going to Amazon to write a review. God. For indoctrinating the children.
Yes. Well, there is that. All right. So it starts with, it's like they don't have, the chapters aren't numbered. They just have titles, labels. And so this one starts with, let's explore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't really have a lot of notes here because a lot of it was a recap from the belief book, I felt like. But what did you think?
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I like the fact that it really opens up. So just on page 3, there was a quote I pulled out, and I thought it set the stage nicely. If you have a break, or even if you just need a little bit of a recap, the quote is, that's really what this book is all about, reality. It's important to see how stories and beliefs are different from reality, because if you don't, you could end up believing in anything. When that happens, you might make important choices based on the wrong answers, and that's never a good thing. I was just like, yeah.
Like JFK Jr. died in a plane crash. Yeah.
He did not. He is helping Trump. That is why things are going so well, Megan.
I'm like,
I mean, come on.
the thought behind that too, like JFK's dad was a Democrat. Like, what the? All people, I highly doubt they would be buddies.
You just don't understand.
Apparently. Do you see when they do like their number magic when they're like, oh, because it's got 7 letters and this with the alphabet and that's a secret code from the aliens or something? I can't when I see these videos online and I'm like, oh my God, they should be institutionalized. But anyway, so that brings us to our next idea.
Yeah.
Which I did not do on purpose, but it just so happened. It talks about the fact that people believe all sorts of things and we should never discriminate against anyone just because of the beliefs they hold. And I feel like this book was written in, I think, like 2016 or something like that. I looked it up before we started because I was trying to figure out which was the second in the series. But maybe he just didn't realize the level of crazy that we were going to achieve as a society by the time we were reading this today, because the people with the number math and the letter math and there's hidden messages and the JFK Jr. and all that, like, I don't have the kindest of thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, I pulled up the same quote, and I guess for me, I feel like the fact that he uses the word discriminate, we should never discriminate against anyone. And so I thought it was an interesting word choice, because I think that generally speaking, I can get behind the idea of the fact that discrimination is bad for any reason. We should not discriminate. Full stop. We should work hard to not do that. The reality is we all do it in one way or another, right? There's absolutely no one who's unpacked all of that crap. But, okay, like I can get behind that. But yeah, I definitely, like, do we have to consider everything equally valid? Right? Like, I don't think that and it gets into, like, logical fallacies and slippery slopes and all of that jazz, right? Because at what point do you get to consider, like, it's not as valid? But then, like, I was just watching a TV show that was about, like, this dark, I don't want to say voodoo because I'm sure it's different, but it was like in New Orleans, and it was dark magic about how to, like, give yourself eternal life. And to do that, you had to kill all of these people, like a virgin sacrifice and yada, yada. Like, I don't think that we should really be saying, like, this is also a valid belief system. Like, I don't, so yeah. And again, I think it's interesting. I haven't had a chance I talked in our episode that dropped a couple days ago that we are traveling this week. And so I read for this week's book club, but I haven't had a chance for my kiddo to read it and for us to have our talk like we normally do. I think the way that it's laid out is good for younger kids. I think that the way that it's laid out and described on page 6 specifically is going to be a really hard conversation to have with a deep thinking kiddo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I agree with your thoughts on discrimination because of the slippery slope. It's the same as everything else. It's the whole, first they came for the so-and-so, and then they came for the so-and-so, and then they came, and I didn't say anything because none of those people, and then they came for me, right? So if we're discriminating against other people, my general rule of thumb all along has been that if you are all consenting adults and you're not hurting anyone, that I really don't care, for the most part, what you're doing. And so that's kind of been my line in the sand as far as consenting adults and don't hurt others. And right now, what we're seeing with a lot of the stuff that's happening with the conspiracies and stuff that is hurting other people because it's bled over into mainstream politics. It's no longer fringe anymore. So this was a struggle for me. So, if I was a hiring manager and someone started talking to me about what JFK Jr. is up to today at the White House, I can't say it wouldn't affect my hiring decision. And I know that's not probably even legal, but yeah, right? It's hard because you're human.
They were like, yeah, do you have pizzas on Friday? Because, pizzas are pedophilia in hiding. And I'd be like, we get square pizza. It'll be fine. But also shred, not move on to the next round of interviews. I don't, yeah, no. So, yeah,
It's hard,
yeah,
right?
it is.
Oh, all right.
I
Sorry, go ahead.
I found with this book that I had a lot of the same initial reactions. So in the first book, I put a lot of red flags of like, whoa. And then when I went back and read it, I was like, I'm not really sure what that initial like strong reaction was, because now that I've read it again, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But it was a lot of moments of like, yeah, just a really strong reaction, but not knowing exactly what it was. In this book, I had a lot of moments where I had kind of like a strong reaction, but I was really clear on like the, whoa, that's going to piss people off.
Whoa, we can only imagine how a Christian would read that. I had one of those in a little while where I wrote it down and was like, do the negative Amazon reviews. Because I was like, whoo, that's going to go over like a ton of bricks, right?
Mhm.
All right. Then on page 7, they give us a little roadmap of what this book is all about. So it says that it's split up into 3 parts. In part 1, you get to find out how and why gods came to be. In part 2, you get to meet some of them in a trip around the world. And finally, in part 3, you'll discover how gods have helped to shape human lives for as long as we've been around. I like a good roadmap. I like to know where I'm going. I like to know the structure of things. So I appreciated that. And I feel like, you know, in some of this, I didn't take notes. For example, when he does continent by continent review of gods, I kind of made some notes on the first couple just because it would be helpful for me in book club to kind of share the formatting of the book and what people could expect. But I didn't write every single thing down. So if you're looking to go on this journey, you have an idea of what the roadmap looks like. Yeah.
Makes sense.
So the next section is called The Scary Unknown. And I just thought it was interesting. They give some examples here of how to understand what fear is, what might cause fear, what it might feel like in your body, and be able to identify that. And then it goes on page 11 to say that fear is a feeling that is needed for survival. And it continues on with questions our ancestors couldn't answer because their survival was less certain than it is in our time. So things like, what am I going to eat today? Where am I going to get the food? I mean, generally speaking, I think the majority of us don't have to go out and kill our food if we want to be able to eat today. Where can I sleep tonight? I think for many of us who are very fortunate in this society, we know that answer most of the time. And so I thought that was kind of a great way of setting up where this structure of these otherworldly beings came from was the uncertainty of life and the fear associated with survival in day-to-day life.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I pulled out also on page 11. I saw it a little differently in that I just thought, especially because this book is written for kind of the 8 to 12 year age range. Although, like I've said, I think it would be perfectly appropriate to do as like a read aloud and a jumping off point with younger kids. And I think older kids could easily read it as, again, another jumping off point, and just exactly where you're going with it might be a little different, right? But for me, I think, especially with younger kids, it's important to address the fact that fear is important for survival, right? And that's like from a really like basic science standpoint, right? Like you get that feeling because your senses are picking up things that you haven't really been able to process. But that was important when you had to hunt and gather to survive in the wild with all kinds of other animals, right? Or, you know, things like the fear of the dark. Like it's a natural survival instinct. It's not something to be embarrassed about. It's not, you know, or like, so just, yeah, I thought that the way they handled that was really good. And it's a good thing to talk about with your kiddos on just a general like life understanding of something that a lot of kids struggle with at that age, right? It's pretty common in the really early parts of puberty for like there to be a big spike in fear about all kinds of things. And so it's like it's well timed, I felt, with the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that.
So then on page 13, there's an example, and I really just liked the way that he laid it out. So the quote says, imagine you are alive a long time ago, even longer ago than our farmer friend, which is something we just talked about. Pretend you are around thousands of years ago when they didn't have fresh water or toilets, let alone cars or smartphones or the internet. What would you be afraid of? Could believing in a God who will help protect you help you deal with this fear? And again, it's just that thing. I feel, I don't know, if you're listening to this and you haven't had these conversations yet, maybe you'll have this. If you're listening to it and you have had these conversations, I'm probably not the only one, but my kiddo has 150%, I don't know, 800% asked me, but why? Why do they believe these things? Can't they look at it and see that it's kind of ridiculous? Like, it's, and so it is helpful almost always to be able to give a situation. Like, imagine if you were in this situation and this was going on and this was going on. Wouldn't you find this helpful? And the vast majority of the time, my kid was like, oh, well, yeah. I was like, okay, well, that's where it started, right? And then it just continues on. So I thought it was a good example.
Yeah, I like the way he lays it out, and there's this beautiful breadcrumb trail, and you're just reading along, and then all of a sudden you get this aha moment where we're like, oh, that's what we were building up to here, is this revelation of this thing. It's structured very well for a young reader to kind of go on that journey and then all of a sudden see the big picture and go, oh, it makes more sense now. So I like the way that they've done that. It's a well-told story.
Yeah, I feel like they do a great job of that throughout both of the first two books. I would assume the third book is the same, right? And even as the adult reading the book, there are a lot of times that I'm like, I'm sure that we're getting the answer. Like, I can feel that I'm being led to the answer. I'm not sure what the answer is going to be, but I can feel that we're getting there and that we're putting all of the building blocks in place for the big, like,
exactly, it's coming. Yep.
Yep.
Then there's a similar conversation about fear of death and a similar journey that you're on. It's a little bit shorter this time, but it also explains that. And again, to Amanda's point, we are leading to something because we'll get there in a moment, but the next section is about afterlife on this earth. So there's always a roadmap that's leading you somewhere in these books.
Yeah, it is. I do want to say on page 15, there's a quote. I pulled it out for a couple reasons. It says, even though humans have learned a lot of things over the last 200,000 or so years we've been on this planet, there are still many questions we haven't answered. Some of those unanswered questions can lead to a fear of death. And so first off, I think it's a good discussion. I think it's great to talk about it for a whole lot of reasons, right? And I like the fact that it even says, humans have been here for 200,000 years. There are a lot of Christians these days who would argue that that's not true, right? So I like the fact that it's laid out that way. But also, I think, especially in the times, post 2020, and just with a lot of other things going on, there should definitely be a little bit of a trigger warning starting around page 15. Death is a big thing. A lot of families are having to deal with it in one way or another. And this might be the book that you're like, we should get that so we have another resource to talk about it. Or it might be the book that's like, maybe now is not the time to do it because we've got some stuff going on and we don't want to accidentally step in it.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. I like it. All right. Then we have what comes after life, which is the next section. For me, that starts on 17. And they are very clear about the fact that we do not know what happens after we die. Plenty of people who can tell you what they think happens after we die. But if we're leaning into evidence-based, fact-based, scientifically proven information, we do not know what happens after we die. So that is where this section kicks off. On page 20, there's an activity. I love the fact that there's a bunch of activities in this section where kids can write something down and draw a picture. And it encourages kids to come up with their vision of what they think happens after we die. And so that is in there as well.
Yeah. So right after that activity, I had pulled out a quote on page 21. It says, most religious people believe in a good place. usually controlled by one god or many gods, where they will get to go live and be happy forever after death. These afterlives are a lot like the places we imagined earlier, but a bit different because there are usually a lot of rules you have to follow to get in. Millions and millions of people around the world believe that they have to do everything they are told by their gods to have the best possible afterlife. And this is just another one of those. I thought it was explained really nicely for kids to help understand. I have 100% gotten the like, well, what's heaven? What's hell? And like, I don't know. It's a make believe idea that like some people really like to hold on to, but it's not real. So like, I don't know, and it doesn't matter, which is obviously not the best answer. And my very curious kiddo didn't appreciate my take on it. So this is better.
Exactly.
Okay, so this section kind of wraps up with this quote I pulled out on page 24. It says, "But if you don't believe in a God, you don't have to follow its orders. You can do the right thing for the right reason and not because you're afraid of being sent to hell. You can help and love people and do the best you can without thinking about rewards or punishments." And I was just like, man, I feel like that is such an important discussion to have with kids because it seems like there are a whole hell of a lot of adults out there who don't get this. Like, I have honestly been asked because we don't church and we are quite happily not religious in any way, shape, or form. Like, well, but, like, why, like, what about being a good person? Like, I would almost guarantee you that we volunteer more, we donate more, we do more good stuff because we want to and we think it's important, not because we feel like that we have to get into heaven or to stay out of hell, right? Like, so yeah, teach them young that this is like that people can just be good people because they want to be good people and that's their value system, not because it has to be based on the idea of a god or gods or religious books or texts or whatever.
Well, and is that what we're seeing from Christianity right now? Is their moral guiding compass? Because
It's solid.
it's
So good.
I'm confused, right?
I know,
Yeah.
right? All of those memes that are like, people keep saying Jesus is coming and like he's coming back, or like, and I'm like, if he showed up on the beaches of Florida, he'd be immediately arrested.
To be detained.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right? I'm like, oh my gosh. No, so it's interesting. We read in a class a couple of years ago, and one of my, I shouldn't say one of my favorite students because I love all of my students, but this kid, he was just with me for ages and he had such a personality and he's so smart and he just always brought life to class, which was awesome. But we read The Hiding Place about Corrie ten Boom, and she was deeply, deeply, deeply religious. And that was his big thing about the book was it kept talking about how she felt obligated to do things or felt called to do things. And he's like, where was just her as a human being being like, this is the right thing to do? And so what she did was incredible. I don't doubt that. But the way the book was written, it almost made it seem like she did some of the things that she did out of obligation rather than her own desire to do a thing. And he picked up on it hardcore and did not let it go and was like, not buying it. She shouldn't, this is not the right motivation for doing what she did.
Yeah. But I mean, I do agree that that is one of the struggles, especially right now. There are definitely some religions out there that are actively teaching their followers, their believers, that anyone who isn't a fellow follower or believer is like inherently bad and won't actually ever do anything good because they don't have a reason to. And it's, yeah, so messed up. So have those conversations, y'all.
Yeah.
All right. So the next section is called Love from Above. And so I thought this was funny because he starts out talking about how there was this giant purple dinosaur and people treated him like he was real and they loved him. And because they loved him so much, they wanted his clothes and his books and all of these things. And it's 100% true. I was a little too old for Barney, but I had a younger brother who was like 6 years younger than me who loved Barney. And yeah, I mean, it was like a whole thing. Barney was a big deal back then. If you don't know Barney and you're reading this and you're like, I don't understand, there was a theme song and it went, I love you, you love me, we're a great big family, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, so the whole thing was like just this dinosaur that loves you very, very much.
Exactly.
Like super positive messaging.
It was.
Right.
Yeah. So this goes on for quite a few pages because, again, he's leading you somewhere and it ties back around. So on 27, there's a section here where it says, kids loved the dinosaur because he was always there for them. He always promised to love them and he never did or said anything mean to them. Kind of how many people picture their gods. And it goes on, and there's this comparison between Jesus and Barney. And that was the point where I was like, oh, here we go again. Because in the last book, there was a comparison about Superman and Jesus. And I thought, oh, here we go again with the Amazon reviews of people getting fired up over the fact. But it's a relatable example or a relatable way to explain it to kids. I thought it was a great message or a great delivery.
Yeah, no, that's it. Really solid messaging and delivery. So same page, right? 27 into 28. There's a quote that says, you might hear someone say that God is love or that Jesus loves you. But what does that really mean? Does Jesus love you more than the purple dinosaur does? More than your family does? How do you know? People who believe might tell you that their gods loved them, and they probably think that's true. But gods don't take them to baseball practice or throw them birthday parties or feed them every day. So why do they believe in that love? And I was just like, oh man, that is such a great conversation starter. Like, there's just so much you could talk about with that alone, right? Like, you can talk about belief and gods and religions, but this is also an excellent example of you can talk about, families and family trauma and how often religion is used to prey on people who don't have someone to take them to baseball practice every week or, and how these things are woven together and how it can be weaponized to fill in that space. And I mean, it just, and missionaries and what that looks like and what that means. It's just like, there's so much in this, like, one little paragraph or two short paragraph space. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to focus and there's a bug terrorizing me. It's like a tiny little gnat and I'm like, if you're watching on the video, it's entertaining, but I'm like, go away. All right. So it continues because we talked about fear earlier in this episode. It continues on to talk about the fact that love is also a big motivator, just like fear, because it feels great to be loved and to give love. It is one of the best feelings we have. So it makes sense that it is part of so many beliefs around the world. Love has been an important part of religion since ancient people started telling stories about the first gods. Our ancestors knew they loved their families and that gods, who they believed created and cared for them, must be like family too. And then there's another section here right beneath that where it says, imagine waking up all alone a long, long time ago. You don't know what anything is or where it came from, but you know you have everything to keep you alive. The water you need falls from the sky, food grows from the ground, and you can even find a nice cave for shelter. If you heard a story about a man who lived in the sky and gave you all of that, wouldn't you believe in him and love him? And so I sound like a broken record, but I like the way it all spells it out and kind of explains the origins of these things and helps us understand, to your kiddo's point, in this world where we can Google anything we want and we can research anything we want and we have all of these logic-based tools available to us, it seems so difficult to understand how so many people could have jumped on this ship and been like, yes, this is my thing. But when you look at it from the perspective of the origins of these things, it makes so much more sense.
Yeah, well, there's that. And then also, I mean, I think a great rabbit hole is this idea of love and how good it feels to feel love and to give love, right? Because that's true and that's totally science backed, right? It's just not many of us can look in our own personal lives and find someone. And if we're not doing that, we can easily look out into social media or Us Weekly or People Magazine and see people who love the feeling of falling in love, right? That dopamine rush, the all of the centers in your brain that are lighting up when you're falling in love and that feeling, but it is impossible to sustain long term with another person because first off, it's a chemical reaction in your brain that happens. And so that chemical reaction cannot go on indefinitely. And, second off, life is life, like once you start lifing and you got to deal with all of the boring things, right? It's not nearly so exciting and wonderful and glorious. But with the God that's out there and, all of the things that are put in place, like, I mean, there's so many interesting things to learn about. There's the way music is used in religion to activate those same parts of your brain that create these same feelings of love and harmony and how all of that comes together and ties into each other. It's interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely lots of ways that you could go with this as you're expanding on this book.
Yeah, and that's the messaging in so many of the songs too, right? So
Mhm.
it's not a surprise and not a coincidence. Then there's another activity in this book where kids can write a story and draw a picture of some of the good things that their God might give to them and bestow upon them. So again, another way for kids to get hands-on and engage, which is always good.
Mhm. So we have more to talk about and we'll get to it. But before we do that, we just want to remind you, if you heard last time or if you're just tuning in and you're like, hey, what's going on? We are changing up book club come September 2025. So we have a Patreon. We have all kinds of things over on Patreon. If you're not over there already, you should totally come join us. There's a free option where you don't have to pay anything and you still get like a monthly newsletter and you can find out some different things. Then we have various membership levels as Patreon does. And you get all kinds of things with that. But one of the things that we're doing is we're going to move our book club. We're going to move our book club over to Patreon so that we can have a more interactive version of book club. We started this out. We have really enjoyed this, but people want to be able to actually like make connections right now. And yeah, Megan and I met during a book club and we became friends and we have this awesome core group of people where we're reading books and again, you don't have to read it. Like you are welcome to come to book club and listen to the discussion. Like we're not one of those, like, we're going to shame you for not reading. Megan and I will always read and you can come talk to us and ask questions and we'll just have a great conversation and discussion. But it is going to be over on Patreon and book club will be an affordable version of a paid version, but it will be over as a membership level on Patreon and it will also be included with the all access. And if you aren't already on Patreon and you want to join, like I said, there's the free option. If you want to pay for a paid membership so that you are for sure in book club, we have a code because we like codes. It's been a little while since we had a good one. So you can use code bookworm, one word, all caps, and it'll give you a really sweet discount over on Patreon. So come join us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited for book club to move over. It's going to be good stuff. So
Yeah.
a little bit more connection, a little bit more community, all good things.
Yeah.
Oh,
And able to go like just deeper.
Yeah.
Like we cover them and we give the highlights and we'll still do some highlight stuff on the books that we're reading for people who just want to listen. But it'll be good to be able to like really tackle, like our first book is on AI and how it's changing education and why that's a good thing. And I'm not sure either one of us fully agree with that, but it'll be really good to be able to like have it not be just us, like a whole bunch of
different
folks
perspectives.
chatting about it. Yeah, exactly. And talking through it and thinking about it.
Absolutely.
Sure.
All right. So last section is called Gods Around the Globe. I think you have the first notes here, a couple of them.
I do. I have a few notes and then I kind of like backed off the notes and you got them. So it worked out nicely. The first the first few chapters, we had a lot of the same notes and pulled out a lot of the same things. And then this one got quite different. So it's interesting. So it starts on page 32. It says, what is a God? This is not an easy question because gods can mean different things to different people. One person might believe the whole universe we live in is a god, but other people think gods are more like people, only a lot more powerful. And I just thought it was good. I mean, again, this is that thing. I know a lot of other people also explain religion as kind of, it's a mythology. It's like Greek mythology. It's like Norse mythology. Christianity is the same. Maybe it's just a little bit more of a living religion, or whatever. But I liked the way that this was explained as we kind of dove into, let's really look at a very small selection of gods from around the globe that will help us just get thinking about things. And then just on the next page, on 33, I pulled out a quote that says, gods have been talked about for a long time, almost as long as people have been around. To get to know more about what gods are like around the world, we have to start at the beginning. And for me, I just kind of felt like this is really important. And it ties back to that comment from one of the previous sections that talked about humans having been here for over 200,000 years, right? Sometimes Christianity especially shies away from acknowledging other gods existed before their new God, right? Or it says that other gods existed and you're not allowed to care about those gods anymore, but it doesn't really explain why they existed or how this evolution happened or occurred. It just gives like a rule and follow it, right? And we're real big on like critical thinking and deep thinking, and so I thought that this was again another one of those. It's laid out, it's spelled out in a good way for younger kids and for any kid who has the bigger questions and wants to go deeper. It's a great jumping off point.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. Then we break into those sections, and it is a very limited breakout of gods. But I did like this first part here where it says, who were the first gods? They weren't men with beards or half-goat people. They were things that people needed: the sun, water, earth, and animals. And then over time, they evolved into deeper, more human-like characters in some cases. So it breaks out then beginning by continent. This is that trip around the world that was mentioned in the early part of the book when we got our roadmap. And so it starts with North America, South America, Europe, then it goes on to Asia, Africa, and just kind of breaks out in a very, very, very surface level explanation how, like, for example, with North America, South America, and Europe, how they are predominantly Christian. But before that, you had in North America, you had indigenous gods like Coyote and Cocopelli. And again, that's the tip of the iceberg. In South America, the Incan people had their own creation story of how the earth came to be and how their existence came to be. In Europe, you had Norse gods and Greek gods, and it continues on with Africa and Asia. And again, very surface level, but I did quite like that. There is an activity here that I think is after yours, but I found it funny that they joked about Antarctica and creating a god for the penguins in Antarctica. And I was like, I do quite appreciate that. We're a very penguin loving household, so I liked it.
Yeah, exactly. We both have penguin lovers, so it seems like an appropriate activity. So in this like list of different gods and things like that, I pulled out a few. I thought it was interesting. In the South America section, they mentioned specifically that Catholic Christianity is the predominant. And I was like, I have heard so many arguments when people are like, Catholics and Catholicism aren't Christianity. Not. And I'm always like, I mean, I kind of feel like if Christ is one of your big pillars, then like, but yeah, I was like, oh, I bet that probably ruffled some feathers. But yeah, on page 45, there was a quote I pulled out. It said, "This is a common story with gods because people knew they needed to use fire to cook and to stay warm, but they didn't know how they first learned to get it. They decided gods must have taught them." And again, it's just that thing. If you look at, cultures and histories and stories around the world, you find a lot of the same themes repeated. And this theme that, like, well, we need fire, we have fire, but we don't actually know who first figured out how to create fire or how to harness fire, right? The first fire was quite possibly from lightning or something. I have no idea. But yeah, we need a story. We need a story that explains it. And so all of these different groups of people and cultures created their own story. And for the most part, someone gave it to them. Someone reached down and gave them fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, just a small warning for people. I like these books. I think they're good for what they are. And I think that generally speaking, they aren't pretty decolonized, but there are a few spots where there are things I'm like, I don't know. And so on page 51, there is a moment where he's talking about before Australia was a settled country, the native people, blah, blah, blah. And I was a little like, I don't, like it's a little bit of an awkward like language. So maybe just if you're thinking about just handing the book to your kiddo to have them read, because you don't do read alouds like me, be aware that on page 51, you might want to have a little bit more of a discussion around how that's worded. And then I like random facts, right? So on page 53, I pulled out this quote. It says, you might remember the Polynesian deity Lono from the Belief Book. In Hawaiian myths, he's a fertility god. A lot of cultures and peoples have fertility gods, right? Lono was thought to be in control of farming, rain, music, and more. Believers in Lono thought he existed before the world was created and that he came down to Earth on a rainbow. And I was like, hell yeah, I want to arrive at Earth on a rainbow. Surf on in down the rainbow.
But that can't be because the rainbow is God's promise, Amanda. That's the sole function of the rainbow, the only acceptable interpretation of the rainbow.
I thought that the rainbow was also like a highway to heaven. Isn't? No?
Oh, no, I've not heard that one. Every time.
Maybe that's just rock and roll.
That's just the snarky response that I see on everything Pride is like, oh, so good to see God's promise on display. And I'm like, seriously? I mean, the origin of the promise thing comes from after the ark, right? After the flood, there was the rainbow and it was God's promise to never wipe out his people. Like, supposedly it was like a moment of remorse or whatever, right? Where it was like, oh, I just killed off like all but 2 human beings or however many Noah put on the boat. I don't know if his kids were on the boat. I can't remember. And so, yeah. And then it was like, oh, okay. So I promise not to do that again. And so that's the only acceptable use of rainbow in this world, according to those people. Right. Yeah. The people who like to make snarky remarks on Pride posts.
I have not seen much of that, but I was just talking to my mom this morning and we were talking about something and she was like, oh, I'm so over like blessed. Everything is blessed. I'm so blessed and, blessed this and blessed that. And she's like, I'm just so over it. And I was like, man, I haven't seen much of that. And I don't know if it's because I just like really curated the algorithm to understand that I don't want to see that kind of nonsense. She's like, yeah, but we're in the Midwest. You better remember. I'm like, I know, but I definitely see blessed stuff, in like t-shirts. And there's like a lot of like, I need to find a good church in like my mom groups where I live. So I think I've just, like really the algorithm understands. And now that we've been talking about it a bunch on my computer, I'm suddenly going to have like post about being blessed or about God's promised the rainbow or some other nonsense. That's my luck.
Exactly.
Yeah. Terminology from region to region and area to area.
Good times. All right. Then the last thing that I noted for this section was just that on page 56, which I am slowly scrolling there on my Kindle because somehow I ended up back in the 30s again. But on 56, there was a list of gods who were said to be creator gods, creators of earth, life, etc. And it is a massive list. And so I thought,
not exhaustive, right? Like a massive list and very far from exhaustive.
Exactly. And so I just thought if you have a kiddo who's super into this stuff and who is reading the book along with you and is like, this is fascinating, this list would make a really good rabbit hole source to go down and to kind of see. And this is just creators. So there would be, I mean, you could do fertility gods, like Amanda said. You could do everything to do with nature that has to do with storms and rain and all that kind of stuff. So
war,
yeah,
right?
war,
Like if you
loves.
whatever your kiddos into, yeah. I mean, heck, if they want to do Hades and all of the others that are into the underworld and like whatever. There's so many, like you do so much for that.
Have the best time ever, right? Yeah.
Real.
All right. So this is the first half of the book. The second half of the book we'll read next week. We're just doing 2 weeks per book because they're pretty short and easy to read. So this is the first half. So we will wrap up here. But before we go, we would love to just ask you a simple favor wherever you are listening to us. Like, comment, share, review, whatever's available on that platform, follow, etc. It just helps us spread the word about the podcast a little bit more. The more traction it's getting as far as audience engagement, it just helps push it out to more people. And those of us that are secular and progressive homeschoolers, we're a little bit more scattered than the church-going homeschoolers because they have church as their unifying point. So the more secular and progressive homeschoolers who are out there feeling like they're the only one homeschooling because their local homeschool group is not that, come, like, share, review. It helps push it out to those people through the algorithm that is running this universe at this point. And we really appreciate your support in doing that. So thank you so much. And we'll see you next week for the continuation of the Book of Gods.
Yeah, definitely. Have a great one.